Proceeding will start shortly.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Backbench Business Committee. We have 4 applications in front of us this afternoon in 2 different categories. The first set of applications are applications for debates on estimate day debates. And we have 2 applications in front of us. And the first is Mr. Robin Walker. Robin, welcome, and please take a seat and make yourself comfortable. And the subject of the application that you've submitted, Robin, is spending of the Department for Education on SEND provision. So
it is. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you.
And so I think we all know, probably from our constituency postbags, that SEND provision is an issue of great concern to constituents. We have already seen some very good backbench debates around this issue, and around specifically there was an F40 motion which David Davis put before the House a few weeks back, which I think was one of the most highly subscribed backbench debates. I think the nature of the challenge in this space is, as we all know, very multifaceted, but part of it is around the funding system and the way in which that works. The Department for Education will always argue that they have been doing lots on this front and have quite credibly set out that high needs funding has doubled since 2015 and increased 60% during the lifetime of this Parliament. The challenge is that isn't matching the growth in EHCPs. And that there is both a revenue and a capital challenge in this space, in that I remember at the last spending review, the government committed £2.6 billion to capital spending to increase SEND provision. Pretty much every, not quite all, but almost every upper-tier local authority in the country has a high needs deficit, and they all want to bring more provision in county or into their local authority area, but the amount of capital that's available to do that is limited, and likely to be more limited thanks to the fact that the department reached an agreement with the Treasury to prioritise RAC when it comes to capital spending over the coming years. So I think both on the revenue side and the capital side, there are arguments to be made around the funding for SEND provision. Primary schools report increased levels of need. That is likely to feed through to secondary schools throughout the system. There are arguments around early intervention. One interesting thing that came out of the supplementary estimates, Chair, which the Select Committee discussed today, is that there was a £250 million transfer from the capital budget to the revenue budget of the DFE. And I think one of the things we might delve into during any debate on the estimates would be to whether any of that came out of the very important capital funding for SEND provision. So I think there's a good case for an estimates day debate. We know that there's strong cross-party interest in this area, and I think we had, I can't remember if it was 19 or 22 at the end of the day, but signatures from all parties and from different parts of the United Kingdom on the application for the debate, even though obviously the DFE estimates primarily relate to England.
Thank you very much. Questions, colleagues, please. I mean, I think one thing that strikes me as interesting, and of course I was at the committee this morning, the Education Committee this morning, despite the additional expenditure on RAC, then to have an underspend of £250 million on capital within the financial year does seem rather strange from my perspective, particularly when you have all of this additional demand for specialist provision to be provided across local authorities and across the whole of the country. So, I mean, I think that's something that can be investigated, and I'm sure that's something you'll want to ask ministers about on the day of the debate, Robin.
Absolutely, Chair. I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's also, there's a question there around the capacity of local authorities to plan and measure for these things, which I think needs to be asked and needs to be delved into as part of this as well, because I think part of the concern that we all have is around how provision is met and planned for in each area, and certainly, you know, I've heard local authorities saying, well, we don't necessarily have the capacity to bid for this money, and that in itself is a concern and maybe leading to some of those underspends. Clearly that's something, if the government's going to meet its aspirations under the right place, right support, right time command paper, they will need to be able to address as well.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And I think another aspect of that is, and certainly my local authorities, no different to many in this respect, is the demand for special educational needs places is still very high and a lot of unmet needs. So I think that's an interesting thing to check in on. And any further comments or questions, colleagues? In that case, Robin, can I thank you very much indeed. So, because of who is here, so Robin, make yourself make yourself scarce. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. But we're going to need to mix and match because of who is here. We were due to have Dame Diana Johnson with an application on spending of the Home Office on asylum and migration, but we'll now move on to the application for an ordinary Backbench Business Committee debate by Dr. Caroline Johnson, and it's on large-scale solar farms. So, Caroline, over to you and welcome. Thank you for coming this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to request, please, a debate about large-scale solar farms. These are an important issue with huge, wide-ranging consequences for our environment and our countryside. Rural communities have been plagued with applications for really enormous solar farms. The solar farms disproportionately are affecting the most fertile parts of the UK. One of the counties particularly affected is Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire produces 12% of the UK's food, including 30% of its vegetables, despite comprising less than 3% of its land. But there are currently 12 NSIP solar farm applications in Lincolnshire, covering 9,000 hectares or 22 and a bit thousand acres. And just to put this into sort of food figures, that would be 81,000 tonnes of wheat, 57 million loaves of bread, or 1.5 billion Weetabix produced from that amount of land, and more than half the land nationally with proposed solar plants.
Most people can only eat two, you know, but it's...
I know, but I had my way to I didn't have my way to actually, but there we are. More than half the land nationally proposed for solar plants is then naturally in Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Rutland, which are the most food-rich parts of the UK. Now, the Prime Minister said that he was not going to allow great swathes of our British countryside to be covered in solar farms, and yet, and he's updated the national planning framework, but it doesn't seem to be working at this stage. So, within my constituency, for example, the Heckington Fen application is 49% best and most versatile land, Beacon Fen 30%, and Springwell 32% best and most versatile land. But this is not just a problem for Lincolnshire, and it's not just a problem for my constituency. For example, Botley West in Oxford, that is another NSIP solar application with 38% best and most versatile land. The Drax application in East Yorkshire is 94% best and most versatile land. Mallard Pass in Rutland is over half, and Old Malton in Thirsk and Malton in Yorkshire is 60%. And one of the other problems with that is that's probably an underestimate, because we know that solar prospectors are allowed to test the land themselves so that they can tell us how much percentage their land is best and most versatile. And it's obviously in their interest to minimise that. And again, that's an issue that I think we would need to debate. It is fundamentally a countrywide problem. There is an issue debate between how we use our land. What do we want our land to have? What is our land use strategy? Do we want to grow food? Do we want to have solar panels? Do we want to grow houses? Do we want to rewild it? All those matters for debate are very important. And given what's been happening in the war in Ukraine and the impact that that's had on food pricing and grain availability, it's really important that we keep a high level of food security in our country. And there are actually alternatives. There are 600,000 acres of south-facing warehouse and industrial building land in the UK, which could be used instead. And I think we need to debate whether and how we make sure that that is an attractive thing for industrial business owners to do, such that the land can be kept free for its proper purpose of growing food. The other thing is it destroys the character of the countryside. I sent a survey out to my constituents and received over 2,000 responses. So this is a high level of public interest. That's more than 20% response rate from my constituents. And they do not like solar farms. More than 90% of the people who returned the survey said that they did not like these large-scale solar farms. And when they were asked questions about whether they were concerned about the use of productive farmland, 68% they were extremely concerned, so 10 out of 10 on their scale. And 55% they're extremely concerned about the visual impact. And some solar farm prospectors will tell you they're going to put them behind hedges where they can't be seen. But in reality, they're very tall. In fact, in some cases, they're 3 times the height of our current Energy Secretary. So, were she to take a lovely stroll, even were Daniel Kaczynski to take a stroll through the countryside, they would be unable to see over the top of these solar panels. They are really impacting.
But aren't hedges that large counterproductive when you're trying to collect the rays of the sun.
Potentially, yes, also the case. And for places like Lincolnshire, where we have the cliff along a lot of cliff villages, they will be able to see for miles around the impact of these solar panels.
Right.
It also have an impact on wildlife. Many MPs are concerned, constituents are concerned about wildlife, how deer progress across the countryside, what if birds think they're water and dive into them and hurt themselves, or they're very hot. So I think there are many, many reasons why these are somewhat of a menace. Of course, we want green energy, and we need to debate as well what the alternatives are and how they can be better used. A small modular reactor only takes 2 playing fields and can generate much, much more energy than whole swathes of farmland used for solar panels. So I think there are lots of different topics, lots of different nuances to this debate, and I very much hope that you'll be able to grant us some time, please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Questions, colleagues, please. Wendy.
Thank you for that presentation. I think you really set out the way this can potentially cover various government departments.
Yes.
Which government department are you seeing as being the most likely that you would want to answer or respond to your debate? Would it be DLUC, given the planning angle, or would it be DEFRA, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is one of the key issues with the challenge, is that we have an energy department set off to find green sources of energy. We have a DEFRA department set off to try and find the best ways of growing food and looking after our countryside. And then we have a planning department sort of stuck in the middle of the two. And because there isn't one obvious department covering the whole issue, that is, I think, one of the reasons that the Prime Minister's stated aim of not having these great swathes covered of the countryside is failing to be adequately delivered. I think we have to ask the government who they thought was the best person to put up, but I suspect it would end up being DLUC.
Yeah, thank you. Bob?
Yes, I mean, obviously, one of the reasons why Wendy will ask that is that because you took Tuesday, we will need to know which answering department is answering, so we can allocate it on the right date, because it has to be when the answering department is actually due to answer.
I see. Okay. Well, I think it could be answered by probably most effectively by DNES or DLUC.
Yes, that doesn't help us that much.
Because they're on a different part of the rota.
I see. Okay. Well,
okay.
All right. So I mean, the other issue is obviously
cabinet responsibility.
The other issue, obviously you've got a large number of people that want to potentially speak in this debate.
Yes.
I mean, I'd just gently say, if everyone did turn up and speak in a 90-minute debate, by the time you've outlined the issue and allowed time for the front benchers to sum up, they're going to get about 2 minutes each, if that. I wonder if, given the level of interest, whether this is something that you might consider, and it's obviously up to you, where we have allocated, for example, a Westminster Hall debate for the whole afternoon, which gives you almost a guaranteed 3 hours for a debate. Chamber time, unfortunately, is beyond us because of the budget, estimates days and so on.
Okay.
It's something you might want to consider.
I think that would be really helpful. I mean, I wrote out and asked whether anyone was interested in supporting the application, and I've got 26 names extremely quickly. I'm sure that if I put some effort into it, I could have got more, but in practice, we only needed 8, so to have 26 so quickly, I think there's a huge amount of interest in it. And as soon as somebody else gets an application in their constituency, their level of interest increases rapidly too.
Yeah. Nigel?
I think I have 2 in my constituency. Without wanting to contradict Mr. Blackman, are you tempted by a motion actually calling on the government to do something? Because this has been debated numerous times. So would a motion in the chamber calling for a planning change to really tighten the rules even further not be more helpful in achieving what you want to achieve than just a 90-minute general debate?
I think tightening planning, I think there are different strategies that the government could use to resolve this issue. One of the things they could do is to make it so that the quality of the land, whether it was best and most fertile or not, had to be independently verified rather than tested and homework marked by the person who wants the planning. The government could make it much more explicit that it doesn't want best and most fertile land to be used. At the moment it says unless there's nothing else locally available, and in Lincolnshire there is nothing else locally available because it's all great land pretty much. And so to say that in any case, even if there wasn't anything available locally, only a small percentage, say 20%, could ever be best and most versatile land for any given application, is another option it could use to tighten up the frameworks. I don't think there's one answer. There's also different inducements that they could use, and the way they look at things like standing charge versus consumption charges on electricity for industrial units, how they can incentivise people to put up the industrial units, I think is more than just one simple answer that we can put forward and say, well, will you do this, yes or no?
Yep. Right. Well, Caroline, thank you very much. We've received the application. It looks entirely in order, so we'll try and find you an appropriate slot, okay?
Thank you very much,
indeed.
Thank you.
So we'll go back to estimates applications now, and next up is, please, Dame Diana Johnson. Diana, welcome. And
apologies for being late. I'm really sorry.
No worries. We're able to, we're very flexible. You know, we just go with the flow. Don't worry. So your application for an estimates day debate is on the spending of the Home Office on asylum and migration. So Diana, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much for hearing this application today. So the application is backed by all the members of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and we're particularly concerned to look at the issue of asylum and migration and the lack, we believe, of transparency related to that expenditure. So one example is the Home Office's decision, which was actually supported by the Treasury, to omit a significant proportion of expected asylum expenditure from the Home Office's main estimates. That makes it very difficult for Parliament and for the Home Affairs Select Committee to scrutinise what's being spent. And actually the omission has also resulted on the 1st of February this year in the Home Secretary having to request an emergency drawdown of 2.6 billion from the reserves because the department ran out of money before the supplementary estimates were approved. So clearly there's something not working correctly with the budget, that they're overshooting so dramatically. We're also concerned about the spiralling cost of asylum accommodation because of the use of hotels. And in the first 12 months of asylum seekers accommodation, that's funded through, at the moment, the Overseas Development Assistance, the ODA budget. From 2021 to 2022 and then 2022 to 23, Home Office use of ODA budgets increased by 165%, from 981 million to 2.6 billion. And this forced the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office to cease all non-essential programmes as spending was being redirected domestically. And the implications for this have been criticised by the Independent Commission for Aid Impact and the International Development Committee. So another area I just wanted to highlight was the problems we've been having around getting transparency on the migration and economic partnership with Rwanda. We've repeatedly asked the department for financial details of that scheme, and we've really struggled to get even the top lines of the cost of that partnership. It's particularly important because the Permanent Secretary in the Home Office requested a ministerial direction from the then Home Secretary, Priti Patel, because he was not satisfied that he could, as the accounting officer, sign that policy off as value for money. So we were told that we had to wait and retrospectively find out the costs of the policy when the costs are published in the annual reports and accounts at the end of the financial year. It was only recently, because of an accidental leak in Rwanda, that the Home Office were forced to disclose what money had been spent and was due to be spent this April. And along with the Public Accounts Committee Chair, we had to enlist the help of the National Audit Office to see what they could find out about the spending, and they produced a report about that at the end of last week. So the view of the Home Affairs Select Committee is that we would like to have an opportunity to debate and look at the budget of the Home Office in terms of the spend on asylum and migration. We think it's good for accountability purposes, and it's good for the Home Affairs Select Committee to be able to get its hands on information about what's being spent. So I hope that provides sufficient detail of why we're concerned enough to request an estimates day.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Diana. Any questions, please? No questions? Pretty straightforward application? Yeah. In that case, Diana, thank you very much indeed. Nice to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Right, well, we move now swiftly back to standard, but certainly not ordinary, Backbench Business Committee debate applications, and that is Paul Blomfield, please. Paul, you're very welcome. Good to see you. And your application this afternoon is the impact of the increase to the minimum income thresholds for partners and spousal visas. So,
well, thank you very much, and you've summed it up. I mean, I think it is a relatively straightforward application. Colleagues will know that the government announced initially an increase in the threshold, a fairly significant increase in the threshold to £38,700, then adjusted the position, making that phased in over a 2-year period. That caused a lot of my constituents some anxiety because they had life plans which were based on kind of assumptions about coming together. Living together in the UK. Some of them were already living here. Some had plans for partners to join them. Probably not the sort of constituents who many might have had in mind when this sort of change in the threshold was introduced. In my constituency, the concerns were coming primarily from early career academics, from NHS staff. I had one tech startup small business say, well, fair enough. I mean, if this is what's going to happen, it means our life's going to change. We're going to go and set the business up in Canada. So they were feeling voiceless and wanted their circumstances to be heard. Clearly, I wasn't alone in hearing similar voices. And I'm pleased to have been joined by colleagues from across parties in making this application today. And Robin's here too. Mark Logan, who's a Conservative colleague in Bolton North East, had wanted to add his name but discovered that he couldn't as a PPS, but I thought I'd just sneak that in to show the breadth of support. So it will be an opportunity to provide voice for those people who've been seriously affected in their life plans by the government's announcement, and to share with the Minister thoughts on how these things might be done differently.
Okay, questions, colleagues, please.
Just to clarify, this will be a Home Office answering department.
It would be the Home Office answering. Sorry not to have been clear on that, Bob.
For a Tuesday, so that would fit with potentially the 26th of March.
Yes.
If you were available on that slot. Because if for Tuesdays we have to allocate to...
Yeah, the last sitting Tuesday is clearly not going to be an attractive option for many people who may not be here for other reasons.
Would be 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I'm sure that we kind of anticipate where the whips might be on that Monday and Tuesday, I guess. I appreciate...
It'll be Rwanda, yeah.
Sorry?
It'll be Rwanda coming back from the Lords.
Ideally a Tuesday which wasn't that Tuesday would, I think, ensure that we would have an opportunity to provide as many different voices from as many different parts of the country as possible.
I mean, it's a 90-minute debate on a Tuesday morning, Paul. I mean, so that's the right answering department on that particular day, and it might be another month until that answering department would be in Westminster Hall again, given the Easter recess. So it's an opportunity. So I suppose I think the crucial question is, if offered that slot, would you accept it? Yes.
Go on.
I would rather not, on the basis that I want to provide colleagues, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but I want to provide as many colleagues as possible with the opportunity to participate in the debate.
Okay, right. When did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, and I think you anticipated my question, Paul, because I was just going to pick up on the point that we'd normally expect at least half of the 8 names to be from the government. So I think we're now at 3 with Robin Walker, potentially Mark Logan you mentioned with who was a PPS. Are you fairly confident that it would be attractive to both sides?
I think so, because I think there'll probably be a range of views on what alternative measures might be put in place, or indeed, how how this might be dealt with over a period which is going to be beyond the next election. But I think that there are people on both sides in significant numbers who want to have the opportunity to provide voice for constituents who've written to them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, colleagues? Yeah. In that case, Paul, thank you very much indeed. We'll now go into private session. Order. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.